Vermeer is really the master of these tiny little personal stories. And he really knows how to engage us as beholders into his paintings. For example, here in his love letter, the way the figures are looking at each other and the emotion that he wants to evoke is something that immediately adapts to us as beholders as well. But he's not only using them as a kind of entrance to the composition, but also in the way, well, he uses light and dark and the contrasts between colors, for example. So he really knows, as always a kind of filmmaker avant la lettre, how to guide our eye through his composition and through his tiny little stories.
I'm Katrien Keunen. I'm the head of science, and within this Vermeer product I'm responsible for the scientific research. We use different analytical techniques. These techniques are non-invasively macroscopic scanning the paintings, and you have to see it like a puzzle. We use different techniques and together we get a better idea how Vermeer made these masterpieces.
My name is Annelies van Loon. I work as a paintings research scientist at the Rijksmuseum. For this project, I'm responsible for the macro X-ray fluorescence scanning of the 4 paintings by Vermeer. Macro XRF goes a step further than the normal X-rays. With macro XRF, you can identify and visualize the chemical elements in the paint, and this gives you information about the pigments, changes in composition, layers of overpaint. It's very special to do research on the paintings by Vermeer from this collection. We have now all these super advanced techniques in-house, and we have not really looked with these techniques at the paintings in this collection, so that's of course super exciting.
My name is Francesca Gabrieli. I am a postdoc at the Science Department of the Rijksmuseum. And I am basically working with the reflectance imaging spectroscopy. So what we do is that we shine some light to the painting, and we are taking images, and for each pixel of our image we have a chemical information. I feel very lucky to have the possibility of working with the Vermeers. It was it was the first time that I could analyze different paintings by this artist, and I felt very honored to be so close and to look at this painting. I found very interesting a particular detail of this painting. The blue of the skirt seemed pretty similar by eye, but then looking at the chemical information, we found out that there is a difference between the two blue. Here we can see that this part is ultramarine, and this is the chemical spectra of the ultramarine. And then if we go on the lower part, is actually a mixture of ultramarine and green earth, and we can see the difference in the chemical spectrum. So this is the image that we get with the camera in the infrared. And what we can see here, for example, is this detail of the basket that is painted on top of the complete, already complete floor. And the same for the cushion below the basket. And this is important information about the painting technique of the artist.
Well, Vermeer's powerful use of light is one of his most important trademarks. And when we look at the Milkmaid, for example, she's standing in the corner of an undefined room, probably a kitchen. But then the light is just entering the room through the window and touches everything what's over there. And you see how, well, the light here is really reacting on the surface of her face, on her skin. But also here, how he's introducing hundreds of different dots that's, well, stand for the way light is really, well, traveling over the pieces of bread that are laying down there. And that is something typical for Vermeer. So he does not only use, well, the traditional way of light entering a space, but also additional elements, like this wonderful contour over here, which is one of the most brilliant contours in 17th century Dutch painting. It's almost neon that Vermeer is using here to give contrast between the figure in the front and the background.
I am Frederik Vermeer, and I'm a postdoc researcher connected both at the University of Antwerp as well as the Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage in Belgium. And I'm a chemist by education, and in my PhD research I developed an instrument which allows us to investigate the surface of paintings. The technique that we are using is called macroscopic X-ray powder diffraction. Ja, dat mag nog naar boven. And this technique uses a very small X-ray beam to look at the surface of paintings. And from this technique we can then learn what the different paint materials are that Vermeer has used. But in a second, more advanced stage, we can also look at the different chemical materials that have formed over the 350 years that this painting has been around. Oké, dan ga ik nu dichter naar het schilderij. Begin terug met 1 centimeter. So the reason why we are using this technique is because we would very much like to know what the technique is that Vermeer used to make his artworks, which different materials he used, and especially to see if during his career there is some form of evolution in his choices for paint materials. So from previous research that we already did on the first Vermeer painting, we can see that, for example, in the white regions, he uses a specific white pigment which is called lead white. And we saw in previous research that even though he always uses this lead white pigment, for very bright regions, he uses one specific type, while in the shadow regions, he uses still the lead white pigment, but a slight variation of this pigment. And we would like to see in this research, when we are looking at the 4 different Vermeer paintings, is he always making this specific choice of using the first pigment for one purpose and the other pigment for another purpose? Or was he just experimenting? We have chosen for this detail because you have a lot of different colors here. You have the white in the clothing here, the pink on the arm, the yellow in the dress, but especially also the blue in the skirt here. So it will give us a lot of information about all the different paint materials that are present in this painting, and then we can start comparing them with the materials we find in the other 4 Vermeer paintings. The instrument or the technique that we use is very slow, so we have 4 days of scanning ahead of us, and each of these days we can analyze a small region of the painting. So here it's around 5 by 10 centimeters, and this will run now for the next 12 hours.
Well, one of the main questions we have is how have these paintings changed over time? So is what we are looking at today the same as what Vermeer intended 350 years ago? So what choices did he make, and what has been altered either by him or by successors? So by bringing all the data of our research together and looking through the paint layers, we will start to understand more about Vermeer's artistic practice.